About 5 or 6 years ago, I believe I was 11, I went over to my friend who lived down the street to ask him if he wanted to come play outside. Since neither of us had a phone, we usually just went over to each other whenever we felt like playing outside, hoping the other person was home. This time was no exception. I rang the doorbell and waited, but nobody came. However, since it was a warm summer day, I thought that maybe my friend and his family were sitting in their backyard and couldn't hear the bell. Right next to the front door of my friend's house is a window that allows you to see all the way through to the other side of the house, including a backyard window. So I peeked through to see if they actually were in the backyard. There was no one in the backyard, however, I did see my friend's older sister sitting at the kitchen table behind her laptop, her back towards me. Excited, I rang the doorbell again, yet still no one responded. Confused as to why no one came, I stared through the window again to see my friend's older sister still sitting behind her laptop. I tried to draw her attention toward me by calling out and knocking on the window, to no avail. The longer I kept looking at her, the more I started to notice something was off. Not only did she not respond to anything I did, she seemed to not move at all, as in not a single muscle. In fact, the longer I looked, the more certain I became she wasn't even breathing, although that would have been hard to see from that distance while she had her back towards me. She was also holding her right arm in a weird position, as if she were in the middle of moving her cursor. From what I could see, nothing on the screen of her laptop was changing either. The longer I kept looking, the more uncomfortable I became. It all just felt so unnatural. At some point, I went to the door, opened the letterbox, and yelled her name through it. I repeated this process a few more times while staring through the window in between, when I heard a sudden loud crashing noise come from inside. I immediately moved back to the window again to see what was going on when I saw that my friend's older sister had now stood up, her back still towards me, the laptop seemingly having disappeared. Needless to say, at this point I'm starting to get creeped out, yet I decided to knock on the window and call out her name again. For a very short moment, nothing happened, when all of a sudden she turned towards me. Her face was not that of my friend's older sister. It was a face I have not come across and have not since, but it looked furious. Before I could do anything else, she suddenly started running to what appeared to be the front door. I started walking backwards when I heard a loud bang against the other side of the front door, at which I just turned and ran. At first I believed it was just some dumb prank my friend and his family had played on me, but when I asked him about it the next day at school, he looked at me in confusion. He told me with a serious look in his eyes that he and his family, including his sister, hadn't been home for almost the entire afternoon that day, but that when they came home they did find his older sister's laptop on the floor, and they had assumed it had just been too close to the edge and had eventually fallen off. When I told him what I had seen, he didn't believe me, quite logically so. I wouldn't have believed something like that either if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. Even after all these years, no one who I have told my story to believes me, but I'm certain that what I witnessed that day had happened, and I often spend quite some time wondering just exactly what had happened. It still scares me to this day, and I can't find anyone who is willing to talk about it seriously. Maybe someone here has any idea about just what went down that day. This happened about 3 years ago, but it still bothers me to this day. I hope you guys can help me figure out what had happened. 3 years ago, I went traveling with my boyfriend through Peru. I had been traveling for 19 hours by the time I finally reached my hostel in Lima. I just passed out and slept like a baby. The next day, I woke up and felt so jet-lagged that I had to take a nap. My boyfriend felt fine, so stayed in the communal room to use the Wi-Fi. As I was sleeping, I sensed something in my room with me, and I slightly opened my eyes to see some dark shadow crouching next to me. As I was too tired, I couldn't open my eyes, and I assumed it was my boyfriend. Except, my boyfriend came walking through the door 30 seconds later. Since I was so tired and jet-lagged, I didn't think much of it, until that night. We were sleeping, and in the middle of the night I woke up. I felt my boyfriend messing with the blanket, but when I looked up, I saw this humanoid figure dancing through our room, really dancing from one side of the room to the other. I screamed to my boyfriend that there was someone in our room, He told me there wasn't and that it was just him messing with the blankets, but I still saw the figure and I kept seeing it. Still freaking out, my boyfriend turned on the light and, of course, there was nothing there. The figure was gone. The next day, we debated to ask for another room as we were going to stay there for 1 or 2 more nights. I didn't dare to ask the staff because I felt silly. As we were debating, there was a knock on the door and one of the hostel ladies came to ask if we were okay with switching rooms as they were going to do repairs in this one. I've never felt so relieved. I don't know what was in my room. I saw it, but my boyfriend didn't, and I can't seem to figure out why they decided to fix the room that day. There wasn't something wrong with it in any way. Did they hear me scream that night? I hope you guys can tell me what had happened. I'm quite sure that it wasn't sleep paralysis as I was fully awake and able to move. That said, it wasn't a nightmare neither as I was awake. I hope that some of you might have some experiences with this and share your thoughts. I am open to anything that can help me solve this mystery that has been haunting me for the past 3 years. This happened about 6 to 7 years ago. I don't remember the exact date, but I remember the events leading up to this in great detail, and I'm interested in what other people might think about the situation. At the time, I was 17 to 18 and had a little Russian doll on my bookshelf that my mom got from one of the friends she made in Russia when she studied abroad there. It's a super tiny doll, only about 3 inches tall, a female dressed in traditional Russian clothes. The doll was sat on the top shelf about 3 to 4 in back and behind something else. Now, ever since I was little, the hallway upstairs always creeped me out. My bedroom is up at the left at the end of the stair hallway and the hallway leads up to my bathroom. In order to go to the restroom at night, I have to go through the end and corner of that hallway. It started kind of subtly. Occasionally, around 6 to 7 years ago, I will wake up to find something having fallen. I had a 3D heart puzzle on my makeup box and I would wake up to find it had fallen on my dresser and split right down the middle. Sometimes I would wake up to find the tiny doll laying face up on the floor. This is where I started to get a little bit creeped out. This doll was set further back than it was tall. If it fell over, wouldn't it have fallen onto the floor face down? Why always face up? This is where things got really freaky, and I'm still really creeped out by it all these years later. I was headed upstairs to the aforementioned bathroom and I turned on the lights to the hallway before I walked up. Like I said, the hallway always freaked me out, and the lights turned on and then flashed out. When I flipped the switch off, the lights flashed back on and then off. I figured, it's an old house, whatever, and went up to the bathroom anyway. The bathroom light switch did the same thing. I got frustrated by this, so I started to angrily flash the light switch on and off very quickly. During one of the bursts of light, I saw a young man, probably early 20s, standing directly behind me with straightish black hair near his shoulders. He didn't feel super scary or dangerous or anything, but I still panicked, told my dad that the lights were having issues, and when he flipped the hallway and bathroom light switches, the lights turned on with no issue. I still feel that awful, creepy being watched feeling in the hallway to this day. I felt like I've been watched my whole life while in that hallway. The heart puzzle and the doll started to fall a little more frequently after that. I was clearly not happy about it, so when my parents were gone, I yelled for whatever it was to leave me alone. After that, the puzzle and the doll stopped falling. I even moved the tiny doll downstairs and out of my room. The awful part is the top of the hallway still gives me this super creepy feeling like I'm being watched, though that might be the 50-ish family portraits hanging on the wall of the hallway. I've had friends who have stayed in the guest room downstairs say that they felt like someone was watching them all night, or that they heard lots of creaky noises. What this comes down to is, am I safe? I mean, I've grown up in this house, but this ghost or spirit, something that's biding its time, or is this all my super active imagination? Is this just me being super paranoid and seeing things that aren't there, or is this a nice ghost, or are there other things I need to worry about? I'm scared to ask for paranormal investigator help for fear that my parents would judge me or that the investigator would awaken something that would make things worse. I'm just curious what you people think. Did the ghost I see actually leave? Was he not real to begin with? Is there more ghosts or spirits at my house? And do I need to worry about them? A little backstory. I grew up in an old bungalow home in good old Milwaukee. Majority of these homes were built around the 1890s to my knowledge and have a lot of character. Certain areas of my house have always gave me an eerie feeling, such as my play area in the attic, and there were always odd occurrences. For example, my parents' wedding picture had slammed off the display once, and a different time they heard the glass doorknob to my bedroom door open, only to find me asleep. The bedroom is where the story takes place. My room was set up to where my bed was on the same hall as the door leading to the main hall, and across from that door was a different door leading to my parents' bedroom. On the wall in between was a radiator. I was about 5 or 6 at the time. At night, I would sometimes see a black figure with a top hat. Weird, right? In the corner between my parents' door and radiator. I couldn't make out any details or see a face, but I knew it was staring at me. To this day, I still remember that feeling. I would always hide under my covers and peek up to see it still standing there. For the majority of my life, I brushed it off as a dream and hardly thought of it. About 5 years ago, my whole family was hanging out at my aunt's house, which was a few blocks away from my childhood home. We had been moved out by then. My aunt had found a bunch of old newspaper clippings and photos hidden in her attic, which got us all talking about how old the houses around there were, the history, and our creepy experiences, and I started to share my story. Once I was done, my mom told me about how one night she was in bed, their bed faced the wall and the door that connected to my room, and she saw a short, black figure run across the wall into my room. At that point, I distinctly remember saying, "Wait, what? That wasn't a dream?" My dad continued to say he always saw shadow figures upstairs when he was working. I'm not sure what or who that figure was, but knowing that was legit is something that still gives me goosebumps. This was about 4 years ago, but I figured y'all would like to hear the story. I was 18 and I was driving home from a church function. It was about 9 at night and dark outside. I live in a rural area, so there weren't any other cars on the road. I was going about 50 miles per hour. I wasn't sleepy, again, only 9 p.m., but I had the radio on in the car, just as something to listen to. Suddenly, I felt very chilled. I'd had experience with dark entities in the past, so I knew what it felt like, and I felt very, very scared. Then the song stopped on the radio, and instead, from the car speakers, came the sound of laughter. It sounded like coyotes, honestly, if you've ever heard a pack of them laughing together. I quickly turned off the radio. Then, from outside the car, right outside the driver's side window, I heard a sing-song voice go, "Hey, look over here." And then seconds later, from the other side of the car came a very loud, very high-pitched scream that went under the car and out the back. Finally, from my turned-off car speakers came the laughter again, as if they were laughing at how good they had scared me. I started praying and didn't stop till I got home and used some holy water and blessed salts on myself. I've always felt that this was demonic, since the spirits seemed to be doing what they were doing simply to scare or hurt me. Maybe they wanted me to drive off the road. I've had other intense experiences, but this one will always stay in my mind as the worst of the lot. This morning I was downstairs watching TV and my brother is playing in his room. He's almost 4, and just out of nowhere he comes running down the stairs yelling "Sissy" hysterically, and it wasn't like he accidentally hurt himself, he was genuinely terrified. I've never seen this kid terrified once, and he's hugging me, and I'm asking if he's okay, and then he just stops crying and acts like nothing ever happened. I kept asking him what happened, and he either just said nothing or ignored me. But now he won't even look into his room and insists on keeping the door shut. We did have something happen about 3 years ago when he was just a few months old, and I'm wondering if it could be connected. Here's the story. Basically what happened was my family and I lived in this super old house, the one before our current residence, that was clearly occupied by something else, but it was friendly and playful. We respected his doings and he respected us, and it was just things like the light switch turning on and off. Physically, not electrical, or it would be footsteps down the hall. One of my friends actually ended up getting photo evidence. I'll have to see if I can find it. But either way, when my mom had my little brother, is when things got a little worse. We have this mirror. I think my stepdad calls it a scrying mirror. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but the frame is black and the glass is tinted red, and there's a skull on the top of it. Keep in mind this little stone skull weighs 5 pounds. One day I was just watching my brother and there was an insanely loud sound. The windows actually vibrated and the skull flew across the room, 8 to 10 feet right next to my head. Considering how much the thing weighs, you'd think it would just fall on the ground if it were to become loose, not fly. So for obvious reasons, I was freaked out and spent the rest of the day at my neighbor's house until my parents came home. Fast forward a couple of months, my parents had gotten this old freezer from an estate sale where this old couple had passed. You see where I'm going with this. And once we got that freezer, is when things started going downhill. Basically, little things happened, like I would feel my hair lightly pulled and I would wake up with bruises. Keep in mind this stuff was only happening to me. This entity was getting more and more violent, and it was concerning my parents and I a lot. I ended up telling a friend about this, and this friend's mom happened to be, I don't know what to call her, but she had me talk to her mom, and her mom could describe our backyard. This friend had never been to our house, neither her mom. Her mom could even tell us exactly where we had buried my mom's pig. A spiritual lady, I suppose. So that caught my parents' interest, and we had invited her mom over, and she automatically felt drawn to that freezer in the garage. And she explained that the first friendly one is still there, but the older man that had passed away was attached to the freezer and had become possessive over my little brother, and she had explained that he did not like me. So about 2 days after that, my parents took a trip with my friend's mom up the coast to just do whatever, I guess, and that night was probably one of the most terrifying nights of my life. It's been 3 years since then, and I can still hear and see everything in my mind perfectly. Since this post is already incredibly long, I'm going to try and make it as short as possible. So I'm watching my brother, of course. He was only 10 months old at this time, and it was around 8:30 at night, and he had fallen asleep on me, and I was watching YouTube on my laptop, TV off, everything off except for the living room light, and I swear to God it was straight out of a movie. There was a loud bang, my brother starts screaming, and the TV turned on and all his toys turned on, and I just got out of there and ran to the neighbor's house, called my parents, and they got home within 2 or so hours. So after that night, she made a plan to bring up another one of her spiritual friends the next day, and they wanted to do something with my parents at the house. They still hadn't told me what they did, but they had me take my brother to a neighbor's house to do what they had to do, and after that day, there wasn't an issue with anything or anyone. No, we don't have the freezer anymore, but I am curious. Do you think maybe that entity had stayed hidden in something of ours and decided to show up again? And if that is the case, why would it wait 3 years? I work in property management. When people move out, they leave stuff behind, and it's like a treasure hunt sometimes. Well, this particular home that my company owns had a house fire. I was sent out with a fire inspector to oversee the damages. The fire inspector did his job and left, and I was looking at all the burnt items. I came to the vanity in the bedroom, watches, sunglasses, jewelry, all melted and damaged. I saw a watch box, and I ran my thumb across the face, and to my surprise, the watch was still ticking. It had a nice gold face to it. I picked up the watch and cleaned it up, and it was in perfect condition. The fire didn't phase this thing. It was an Invicta. I tried it on and it fit. In my mind, I was thinking, score, right? A really nice watch. Usually I just sell items I find, but not this. This was a really classy one. I wore it a few times and started wearing it when I would go out with my girlfriend. After I got that watch, me and my girlfriend started to argue and fight a lot. Feelings changed for each other for no reason, and we eventually broke up. At this time, I didn't suspect the watch. The next time I wore it, it was a few days before my birthday weekend. Happened to fall on a Super Bowl Sunday, so I was excited. I wore that watch every day. I started to feel sick that Friday, and by Sunday, my birthday, I was so sick I couldn't get out of bed. Still, have not suspected the watch. So a week later, I feel great and go out with friends downtown, so, I had to wear the watch. I departed early because I work part-time at a bar. I get home after my shift about 2:30 and crash. About 20 minutes later, I wake up to this beeping noise. I am so disoriented, I am reaching around for my phone to shut the alarm off, but it's not my phone. I hear some shouting outside, so I look out my window and see people in the garage access road of the condos. I am still confused and don't know what was beeping. I get out of bed because I notice the light on in the living room coming under my door. I go to open my door and I couldn't believe my eyes. The entire living room was filled with smoke, and then it hit me. The condo is on fire. I scramble to throw some jeans and a t-shirt on and run outside to where everyone else is, and sure enough, our garage is in flames. People are all out watching the spectacle and the fire trucks show up. They go in and put out the fire. Luckily, nobody was hurt thanks to the sprinkler system containing the fire in the garage. As the smoke clears, we can finally assess the damage, and lo and behold, it was my roommate's drone battery that had exploded when he was charging it. It was charging on top of my plastic bins that had all my keepsakes, yearbooks, pictures, my artwork, ticket stubs, comic collection, memorabilia from trips, just stuff that can't be replaced. I'm looking around and nothing else burned. Nothing, just my stuff, and nothing was recovered. After the shock wore off, I was lying in bed in tears because I lost everything, and my mind was racing, and I was thinking, why me? Then I rolled over and see the watch, and start to put it together that every time I wore that watch, something terrible happened, and the fire was the final puzzle piece since I found that watch in the fire. Since then, I have not touched the watch. It's been in the same place since February, and everything has been going really good for me. I refuse to touch it or move it and have been wanting to get rid of it. The first thing I did was call the previous tenants and try to get a hold of them. I left several voicemails stating I recovered their watch and wanted to return it, but they never called back or contacted me. I feel I can't give it away or sell it, as it may be bad for me putting that burden on someone else or spending the money from the watch and something bad happens with whatever I purchase. I have told my friends asking if anyone wants the watch with full disclosure of the events I went through when I wore it, and everyone refuses. No surprise there. So my question is, how do I rid myself of this item without causing any more sinister accounts happening to me? I live with my boyfriend in the house he grew up in. I would stay the night with him sometimes before moving in, and from pretty early on, he told me that at some point, everyone always sees someone or something in this house. I guess he wanted to warn me so I wouldn't be freaked out when or if it happened. He told me to let him know if I saw or experienced anything, but wouldn't go into details of anyone else's past experiences. I guess so he would know if it was the same thing as everyone else without putting any ideas in my head. Fast forward to about 2 years ago, right before I actually moved in all the way, but was pretty much staying there all the time, just waiting for the lease of my apartment to end. I was in the laundry room, bent over taking clothes out of the dryer to fold, and I felt what I thought was him walk up behind me and pinch my butt. I turned around and no one was in the room with me, so I stepped out and looked into the living room, and he was laying on the couch. No way for him to get there without me hearing or seeing him go from where I was to where he was that quickly. So I told him about it, and he asked me some questions but seemed a little surprised by what I experienced. I didn't know if he didn't believe me or what, which was weird since he had already warned me of seeing things. Now onto the bathroom, and this happens frequently. I often get the feeling of someone stepping into the shower with me, yet there is no one there. No one in the bathroom at all. I have never seen anything up until last week. I was asleep and had been so for a couple of hours. My boyfriend hadn't come to bed yet, so he stays up a lot later than I do. I woke up a little after 1 a.m. because I heard him come into the bedroom, so I looked over towards the door and there was someone standing next to my closet, sort of leaning against the door. I knew it wasn't him immediately. It was a silhouette of a man who was standing there watching me. I focused my eyes and tried to see better, to try to focus what in my bedroom could make it look like a shadow of a man, but there was nothing different about my bedroom, except him in there. I closed my eyes for a few seconds and opened them again, and he was still there, so I told him that I was going back to sleep and he could stay as long as he didn't bother me. I never felt threatened by him, but I did instantly feel like this is who I had felt in the house. I told my boyfriend about it the next day, and again, he seemed a little confused, so he finally tells me that there had never been a man. It's always been a little girl, but no one has ever seen a man. So now he thinks that this man came with me, but I had never seen or felt him anywhere before. Does anyone know why I'm the only one seeing this man? And if he did come with me from somewhere, why had I never seen or felt him before moving into this house? I thought it might be fun to share the weirdest and scariest events of my life, of all types, natural and supernatural. My first post, but I do love spooky stuff, so I hope you folks find this interesting and or some insights to share. I'll start with the less ghostly stuff and work from there as best as I can recall. The Curious Cats. 17 years ago, 5 of us went camping in the wilderness. For most of us, it was our first foray into the deep woods to spend a night instead of just drinking on a beach. We were all in our mid to late teens. We had found a deer trail in a clearing and decided to set up for the night, made a fire and settled in. 3 of us couldn't sleep and instead sat by the fire roasting some hot dogs and chatting. I can't recall the time exactly, of course, but it was quite late, between midnight and 1 a.m. That's when we heard the low but very large snarl of a wildcat in the distance. The 3 of us got startle-eyed and just shared looks at each other. Naive kids were not prepared for wildlife. A minute later, the next growl came, but this time from another direction, followed shortly thereafter by another growl opposite, like 3 points of a triangle around, and we got spooked pretty good. That worsened when another cat snarl came from the first direction, only closer, and the second direction, also closer, and the third even closer. These bloody cats were each making a distraction in their one spot while the other 2 advanced, and the second would make a noise so the other 2 could advance, as they kept taking turns. Outside of the situation now, it was actually quite remarkable to witness. The last snarl came at the edge of the camp in the tree line. It was a very small clearing we were in, so it was basically no more than 10 feet from us at the fire. We kept waving our flashlights around but could catch nothing. The only cats native to this area were cougars and lynx. We always assumed it was the latter. We never heard nor saw anything after that last noise. I assumed they just wanted to investigate the smell of cooking meat and were deterred by the fire and group of people. But man, wildcats scare the crap out of me. Needless to say, the 3 of us did not sleep that night. A path less taken and stalked. 8 years ago. Again, wilderness fun. This one started off quite funny but changed quickly at the end. I was hiking with my friend in a national park, family area with lots of foot traffic and trails, very busy most of the year. The trails were quite easy, however, and we wanted to actually get some decent exercise, so we were watching for the trails that branched off and looked a little more adventurous. All the trails had colored ribbons, and we spotted a small, rough trail with a different ribbon down the way, so we decided to follow it. The trail became increasingly difficult, until eventually there was no trail and our only guide were the markers in the distance, climbing up harsh terrain and forcing through thick foliage. The trail finally ended as we reached a recess in the canyon wall with no other direction to go and a deathly plummet to the rocks and water below. What kind of god-awful trail is this? and we looked at the final marker next to us at the end of the line. Search and rescue. It was search and rescue markers we thought were trail tags. Hilarious to us at the time, but we were still kind of annoyed. We began our long descent back to our campground. About half an hour from the end, I got a sudden panic. You know that feeling you get when you can just feel someone watching you? That, only with malicious intent. My mind was racing and I just knew we were being watched and stalked by something. I began looking around and watching the trees behind and beside us. What was really concerning was when my friend noticed my sudden shift and said simply, "You feel it too." He said he felt that we were being stalked by something and he just knew it. Caveman's sixth sense, ladies and gentlemen. It's real. Nothing ever came bounding out of the woods for us, thankfully, and the feeling subsided a couple of minutes later, but that deep-rooted feeling of instinctual danger is still vivid in my memories. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/LetsReadOfficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear it featured here on the channel. And grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt.com. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.